Hello everyone, and welcome to my first video. Some documentation on my build of my Folger Tech Kossel, the 2020 version Rev B. The Rev B is important as there are differences between the A and the B, though it's not readily apparent from their documentation. If you're here, it's because you're thinking about buying one, or putting one together, or in the process and need some help. I'm hoping I can answer some questions for you because I sure had a lot, and there's not a lot out there on the Rev B and the basically later models than what their documentation on the Folger Tech website describes. So hopefully I can answer something and give you an easier time than I had with it. The first thing you need to do is go to the website and actually get the information, as it does not come in the box that you saw earlier. The box being this long thing here. As you can see, I got it for Christmas, so there's some Christmas decorations. They'll be in the background. I'm sorry about that. So, I'm also sorry for any problems you might have with this video, because I kind of decided to do it real fast for somebody that I know. So on their website, in between here, you'll see a Google Drive password, a Google Drive place, and that will take you to a list of files that kind of looks like this. I blew it up a bit, with pictures and everything. This is where you'll find the guide. One of them says guide, one of them says Rev B guide. Make sure you get the right one. Now this guide is nice, but it stops right before it's time to wire everything. So what you have to do is go back to the Rev 1 guide and go all the way past the steps that you might have already done in the Rev B and get to the wiring portion near the bottom. Be careful, if you look at these directions, they will confuse you because you did the Rev B. The next step is all of the parts and equipment. As you can see, I've got a buttload, the proverbial buttload, of tools here. I have an extensive set of tools in my garage because I did cars and bikes and everything, and I inherited some. But you will need all of this and more to do this. The directions do not have a list of tools, but I can tell you it's quite extensive. So make sure you have everything, and most importantly your multimeter, a soldering iron, which if you don't have, you shouldn't even try this because it's a definite must, and various tools such as extra Allen keys, wire cutters, calipers are great for measuring, of course your ruler, multiple screwdrivers, wire cutters, pliers, everything, a knife, everything. You just can't stress this enough. If you don't have it, you're gonna hate yourself halfway through. After that, you'll get a bunch of parts. They come in various bags. They kind of look like this. You know, this would be your parts list for all of the nuts and bolts. I put all the nuts and bolts in baggies and labeled them as such. This was an awful idea. I suggest using an egg crate, some other storage system, because you're gonna be searching for them. There's 10 variations of every kind of screw, which are basically M3, M4, and M5 screws, which if you don't know what that is, do a quick look up. It's the diameter, then the length from the head to the bottom. So make sure you're a little versed in that. The next step was building it. It wasn't so bad, but there are some tricks that I can tell you. In these parts lists, you'll find various screws and bolts and nuts. And amongst all those, as I'm not prepared to do this video because I am flying by the seat of my pants there, you will find these T-nuts. Now these are something that were new to me. And they're new because they don't look like your standard M3 nuts, which would be these guys right here, of course, next to some screws that I got for my printer bot. Now my hand's stuck in the bag. Alright, all of that aside, these T-nuts kind of look like this. And what they do is they go into these channels on your 2020 extruded aluminum. Now here's the trick, and I bet you can see it in there, is they turn sideways in there and they clamp it together when you tighten them down on the top. Well, I thought as I started to build, and there are a whole bunch of these, I mean they are packed in there, you know, on every single thing, 2 and 4 here, a couple on the ends here, and they are everywhere, and you will use a lot of them. What I thought going into it was that you had to slide these guys in the correct form so that they would actually go right into that slot and stay like that and then clamp down. This isn't the case. A helpful tip: if you have your screw, bolt, whatever you want to call it, and your T-nut in place and they're loose, it doesn't matter how you get them in place, but make sure they're loose. They can wiggle a little bit, kind of turn your Allen key in the direction that you need to tighten it, always to the right in this case. I don't think there were any backwards ones. And as long as it's loose, eventually it should turn for you. This is huge help. I was sitting there taking parts back apart, putting them back together, all because I didn't know this. I didn't figure it out till well into the process, and I can tell you, you will waste a lot of time if you don't know this. So keep that in mind, maybe do some tests on it and everything, and you should be fine. The next helpful tip I can give you is this. Make sure you have a drill, a rotary tool, files, and other sanding materials. There's my drill. I have a rotary tool here that I bought for $10. That's all it is. It comes with a bunch of bits, $10. And you need this. And here's why. Some of these parts, like I believe they call this the effector here, the part that moves above the extruder, or the hot end, sorry, are 3D printed along with these carriages. As you can see here, 3D printed. Well, I kind of got a funny batch. Most people don't seem to have a problem with these, but my batch, it would seem like 2 out of the 3 holes would be fine. The other ones would not even let the screw go anywhere close to going through them, so I had to hollow them out. If you don't do this, you end up cracking the 3D printed part. You know, the set screws, sorry, the captured nuts don't seem to fit in there and everything, and you're just going to have an awful time. And I actually broke one of these, had to glue it back together. They give you glue, which is nice, but it's not what it's for. And I wish I didn't have to do it, but I pretty much had to sit here, and every single bolt that went through one of these 3D printed parts, I had to hollow out the hole. I had to, you know, kind of carve out where the captured nut was and go from there. And it was every single one. So that would be probably my biggest thing, is that there was nowhere saying, hey, these probably aren't really going to line up. They tell you that they're going to finesse, but I didn't have a single one that didn't need some sort of alteration to it. The next thing was the size of the bolts. Now, they come with a lot, and there are a lot of spares. As you can see here, I'm done. This kit is finished. I have a huge amount of leftover parts. And this is because, I could take a guess, it's because they give you all the parts for the Rev A, but the Rev A doesn't use this kind of system where the rollers, the nylon wheels, go on the outside. They have one that has a channel that goes on the inside here. And that requires a lot more screws, bolts, and other cutout parts from them. And without all those, you save a lot in the screws, which is probably why they did it. But regardless of that, you're going to have a lot of extra parts. That leads me to my next thing. As you can see, if I come around here, on top of my effector, you'll see 2 long and 2 short screws here. Bolts, whatever you want to call them. Now, the reason there's 2 short and 2 long is because I had to get in there and tighten down that brass push fitting. Well, the directions tell you to take these and not use the nuts on the top, but on the bottom side of it. And I don't know if I can get a good picture of that, but there they are, sort of, with some bad lighting. But my main problem is that there are a lot of pieces in this kit that they just don't work with the screws they send you. So these ones I had to cut using a pair of very strong wire cutters, and then sand down to file so I could get even a 10mm onto that brass fitting. Same thing over here. On the inside of this, there's a few of them. If they're not perfectly aligned and flat and flush on that 3D printed part right there, they're going to hit your rods. And I had to sand those down, file those down. Now, I didn't know at the time I was going to have a pile of leftover parts, so knowing that, what I would tell you is this, very helpful hint. Go through your instructions. Put aside all the parts that you will need for each individual step and see what you have left over at the end. That will let you know if you can use the shorter screws and different locking nuts or other parts, so that you know you have that kind of backup there. And you won't have to do what I do, which was hours of sanding, filing, and otherwise adjustment for the screw size.